Hey there, welcome to Full Melt Extractions. My name is David. If you're a solventless extractor, or you want to learn to be one, I'm here to help you gain the knowledge you need to elevate your craft to the next level. And more specifically today, I'm here to keep some of you from making the #1 most common rookie mistake when it comes to making water hash. Sign into any online hash forum such as r/bubblehash on Reddit or water extraction hash makers on Facebook, and these are one of the most common types of posts that you'll see. Scroll back through the history and you'll notice someone will post something like this just about every week and sometimes multiple times per week. The strain and level of freshness of starting material may vary, but the story is always the same. It's always a beginner extractor posting pictures of a hash they pulled out of the bags some usually unspecified period of time beforehand. If it's fresh frozen, it's commonly clearly in such a warm environment that it's causing it to grease up on the blotter screen as it self-presses. The title of this post is generally something like, "I got this far, not sure what to do now," or perhaps, "First time making bubble hash," or some such other blatantly obvious statement. These people clearly got so excited about running their first batch of bubble hash that they failed to prepare adequately beforehand and rushed into the process without making a plan to break their hash down into granular form, or in some cases, even understanding that's a thing they need to do. But that, if it hasn't already, is not going to happen to you. How do I know this? Well, first and foremost, you took the time to watch this video. Now you know what mistakes not to make, and knowing, as they say, is half the battle. And secondly, because in the remainder of this video, I'm going to supply you with the knowledge of the tools and techniques that I have found to be the most effective for quickly and easily breaking full melt bubble hash down into its granular form. Let's start with my least preferred option, but really the only one if you've let your fresh frozen hash get into this fully greased up state as you see in this picture here. The only real option in such a case is to freeze and microplane your hash. It's not a preferred method for me or for most experienced hash makers. Think of the difference between a flour sifter and a cheese grater, and you start to understand the difference between a sieve and a microplane. One is designed for sorting or separating granular material, and the other is for grinding or exuding a material through sharp-edged holes. The drawback to the second method in the case of bubble hash is that the waxy cuticle surrounding your trichome head acts to protect the cannabinoids and especially the terpenes inside from evaporation and excessive oxidation. The sharp edges of the holes on the microplane damage that cuticle, however, and some terpenes that would have been preserved had the head been able to remain intact will be lost. But if your bubble has sat around in a puck form for too long and greased up beyond any hope of being sieved, this is still by far the better option than trying to let it dry in its puck form. Because if you do that, you run a very real risk of your hash molding, like this unfortunate extractor. At least with the earlier posts, they got to a certain point and realized, okay, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do from here, so I better ask somebody. Better to admit your ignorance as a beginner so it can be remedied.
Stop it. Get some help.
Than to be the person that tells themselves, no worries, I got this. I always see hash in chunks, so that must be how you dry it. I'll just tuck this away for a few days in a cool, dry space and... Some chewed up cuticles on your heads is vastly preferable to this. I think we can all agree. So let's go over some tips for microplaning. First, your hash needs to be frozen. Your microplane should also be frozen at least 20 to 30 minutes, preferably an hour before attempting to microplane. Also, you should wear some gloves while you do this, at least medium nitrile gloves, although heavy is better, in addition to getting your tools and your hash cold. It really helps to get your hands cold as well. A good trick to do this is to freeze a bottle that is mostly full of water. Remember, not too full, ice expands. And cool your microplaning hand down with it for a minute or two before attempting each piece. A hash puck that is about as big around as a silver dollar should be broken into 3 to 4 pieces. You don't want to do too much at any one time because your hand will get warm and the hash will start to get sticky and tacky. This process works very well when it's kept cold, but starts to gum up quickly if not. So just take it one small piece at a time. So now that we've covered microplaning, let's talk about the better of the two ways to separate your hash into granular form. The sieve. Using a sieve to break your hash up has many advantages. The first of which is that it can be done immediately after pulling your hash out of the water, starting the drying process right away rather than waiting an hour or more for your pucks to thoroughly freeze. This method also avoids the terpene loss and extra oxidation caused by the cuticles on your trichome heads being chewed up by the microplane, and instead gently sorts them through the holes of the sieve, still intact in tiny clumps of heads small enough to dry evenly. Also, remember that silver dollar-sized puck that you had to break into 3 to 4 pieces to microplane? Well, you can easily do a puck several times that size in one go in the sieve in about the same amount of time or less. And since you're not touching the puck, you don't have to cool your hands down either. Just your tools. It's quicker, it takes slightly more finesse, but it's easier once you learn the touch for it. Even more importantly, it's easier on your hash and helps you preserve more terpenes, which lately in the hash making biz has been the name of the game. The only way to preserve more terpenes is going to run you damn near a cool $3,000. A freeze dryer is great to have if you can afford it, and it certainly does take all the challenge out of sieving. But if you're like me and you don't have an extra $3,000 laying around to blow on a freeze dryer, just learn and follow these sieving tips and you'll be wet sieving fresh frozen resin like a pro before you know it. Perhaps the most important factor that none of these sieving tips will work without is making sure that the ambient temperature in your extraction lab falls within the proper range. An ideal room temperature for sieving is between 35 to 50 Fahrenheit or 2 to 10 C. It can be done up to about 60, perhaps 65 F if your technique is on point and you work quickly enough. Any warmer than that and you might as well forget about it. Just freeze and microplane. The second tip is not to apply too much direct pressure to your resin. Yes, you need to press some water out of it for it to sieve properly. If you sieve your puck with too much water in it, you will notice water droplets being sifted onto the parchment along with your hash. 1 or 2 of these can be dabbed up with a small piece of paper towel, but if you leave too much water, this won't be feasible and your resin will puddle in spots where it mixes with the water droplets. The best way I've found to gently press the correct amount of water out of your puck without overpressing is to collect your puck on a pressing screen placed on a bath towel, folded widthwise and lengthwise. Fold several layers of bath towel over the top of one another and press firmly, but not too firmly, on your puck through those layers of towel. All those layers will cushion your puck from excessive pressure, and the absorbent layers of towel underneath will wick away the water that is being pressed out of the puck. Then you find another dry spot on your towel, move your pressing screen over there, and repeat the process. Depending on the size of the puck and the amount of water in it, I tend to do this 2 to 5 times. Just keep moving the puck and gently pressing on it through the towel until the towel underneath the spot where you just pressed feels relatively dry. It doesn't necessarily have to be bone dry, but if it still feels soaking wet under the towel, you need to do another press and check under the puck again. The final tip is to work quickly. The longer your resin sits in a puck form, the more gravity starts to press it down into a solid piece. If your lab temperature is close to the freezing point, say at around 35 Fahrenheit or 2 C, you have a little more time before your pucks will self-press and become unsuitable for sieving. A smaller patty will also self-press much faster than a larger one. A piece that is only, say, a gram or 2 of high-quality resin will self-press almost instantly, even in quite low temperatures. One that is more like 4 to 7 grams will take a little more time to self-press. So if your lab temp is very low and you're getting good-sized pulls from each bag, you can pull several bags before sieving your patties. If that's how the batch is going, sometimes I'll collect down through all my gold grades, so in other words, 160, 120, 90, and 73, quickly press and sieve all those, and then if I'm collecting any lower bags, collect those and start the next wash spinning up before sieving my lower grades. However, if your lab temperature is toward the higher end of this range, and or you're pulling small amounts from each bag, then I pat dry and sieve each patty as I collect them. As in these kind of conditions, sieving can still be done, but it must be done quickly because your resin will self-press much faster in that case. As far as the actual mechanics of sieving, as you can see here, it's all in the wrist. First, you want to break up your puck with the edge of your sieving spoon until it's broken into tiny pieces, many of which are small enough that they are now falling through the holes. Once most of the pieces have been reduced to close to that size, keep using the same wrist motion but add a slight scoot on the downstroke. As you're doing this, you want to remember to always keep moving the sieve around the area that you're spreading your hash. We're trying to make a nice even layer on the parchment and not pile our resin up too much in any one spot. Once the great majority of our resin has fallen through the sieve, we can take the edge of our spoon and scrape it along the bottom to push the last little bit through, and then give a few nice sharp taps on the edge of the sieve with your spoon to dislodge any that might remain stuck to the mesh. If you've done this correctly and in the right environmental conditions, there should be very little resin left on your sieve. Still, sometimes, even despite your best efforts, you will have a patty that has already begun to self-press before you were able to get to it, and will resist being broken up with the edge of the spoon. If you simply try and hit it harder to break it up, you risk the flexible bottom of your sieve rebounding and flinging your hash out. To get a stubborn puck to break up properly without this happening, simply set your sieve down in your drying box while you break up your puck. With a solid surface now under your puck, it will break up much more easily, and this will also help prevent the bottom of your sieve from rebounding and flinging your hash. If that still doesn't work, then your best option is to stick it in the freezer and come back to it later with a microplane. If you try and force your resin through before breaking it up properly, it's game over for properly sieving that puck, and your sieve is going to look like this. Don't panic if it happens. Just stick your spoon and sieve in the freezer for an hour, and at that point, they should have frozen, and the resin will be brittle enough that you're able to take the spoon and scrape the stuck-on resin into your drying box relatively easily. Hopefully I've added enough knowledge and techniques to your arsenal that you never need make a post like the ones we went over today in this video. If you found this information helpful, by all means, give the video a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future uploads. If you have any questions, critiques, or commentary, or just want to shout out the strain you're growing, extracting, or smoking, dabbing, or vaping on, then by all means, leave it down below, and as always, let's hash it out in the comments section. This has been David with Full Melt Extractions, reminding you to keep up that passion for the hashing. Thanks for watching, and happy hashing.